Chandler Smith confirms he will not be returning to Joe Gibbs Racing in 2025, and Zane Smith is still very likely headed to Row Motorsports in 2025. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight on those really quickly. We're first going to talk about Tilly's, as it was reported by Adam Stern earlier today that they have new merchandise that is coming out from Tilly's. If you take a look at this merchandise, I think it's going to cost a little bit of money, around $40 to $50 at least, and some of the prices are going to go up as you spend more. Honestly, this merchandise looks okay. It's not the best merch I've seen. I've definitely seen better NASCAR merch for sure, but it's really crazy that we're continuing to see a lot of these NASCAR merchandise coming in, and that's a lot more money that could be coming in the NASCAR's pocket going into the future. So though, I think it does look solid in some ways, and hopefully people will be able to buy some of this and get it out there so people can watch the sport in the future. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Dale Jr. Now, if you were on social media earlier today, you probably saw that Dale Jr. was wearing the red Budweiser Firesuit. Now, why is Dale Jr. wearing a red Budweiser Firesuit? Because remember, this weekend, he will be competing at Florence Speedway in the number 8 Budweiser car. For the first time since 2007, Dale Jr. is partnering up with Budweiser and will be running the South Carolina 400 this weekend at Florence Speedway. The car looks absolutely incredible, and I gotta say the Firesuit brings back a lot of nostalgic memories for me. It looks absolutely incredible, it looks amazing, and it's pretty cool that they're bringing the Firesuit back. They got the legendary Bud can as well, which I think that looks really good in my opinion. I think there's a lot of positivity that definitely comes from this, and it's pretty awesome and great to see they're bringing the legendary red Firesuit back. It's really awesome and really great to see. I really hope Dale Jr. can do great in South Carolina 400. He's a good late model racer, obviously, though, so Jr. will have a good chance and opportunity, especially with Junior Motorsports, to win the South Carolina 400 this weekend at Florence Speedway. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Air Force. As it was confirmed earlier today that Air Force will be returning to sponsor 2011 Racing once again in 2025. It's unclear how many races are going to sponsor Bubba Wallace throughout the 2025 season. Of course, Bubba will be back in the 23 car, but Air Force is back to sponsor for a select number of races next year. This partnership came into play in 2024. In 2023, they have been working with Legacy Motor Club, or before, Richard Petty Motorsports or Petty GMS, and now they're working with 2011 Racing currently at the moment. I am very intrigued to see how many races they're going to run. My guess is they're probably going to be on the car potentially for the Daytona 500. We've seen them run that car in the Daytona 500 in the past, so I have to think that's going to be a race they're looking to run, maybe do like the Chicago Street Course, and maybe a couple other races throughout 2025. But nonetheless, it's really great to see, and happy to see Air Force will be returning to sponsor 2011 Racing once again in the 2025 campaign, and they could also potentially work with a guy like Riley Herbst also in 2025, who we're going to talk about potentially later this week. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Chad Kendrick. As it was announced earlier this afternoon that Chad Kendrick will be returning to crew chief for Rackley War Racing once again in 2025. Chad Kendrick, who crew chief this past season for Ty Dillon and near the end of the season for Dawson Sutton, and I believe for Matt DiBenedetto 2 years ago, is back to crew chief once again for 2025 with Dawson Sutton, who will go full-time in the number 26 truck for Rackley War Racing this upcoming year. Chad Kendrick is a very, very solid crew chief, has a lot of veteran experience. He's worked with people like Timothy Peters, and has worked with a lot of teams and organizations in the past, and especially GMS as well. I really believe that he is going to do a solid job with Dawson Sutton. I think Dawson had showed some potential throughout the year, and I think he's done a really good job as a young driver, and I think Dawson, while I don't think he's going to be absolutely a contender for the championship by any stretch of the imagination, I certainly do think that Dawson Sutton definitely has a ton of potential to be very fast and really, really strong going into 2025. But Chad Kendrick, I think, is going to be someone that can provide it. You need a veteran crew chief to work with them. You don't need someone young like they did with Front Row, with Dylan Capella going to work with Lane Riggs. You need the guy who has a lot of veteran experience as a crew chief, and I think that Chad Kendrick is going to be the guy for that job. So nonetheless, really glad to see this. Is a really good move in my opinion for them to do this, and pretty cool that Chad Kendrick will be working with the Rackley War Racing organization in 2025. I think it's a good decision to bring him in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the ARCA Rookie of the Years for 2024. As ARCA on Wednesday, before all the news started coming out on Wednesday, they announced their Rookie of the Year winners for 2024. In the main ARCA series, it was LeVar Scott. For the ARCA East series, it's Connor Zilisch, and for the ARCA West series, it's Eric Johnson Jr. Let's begin by talking about LeVar Scott. Not a shock or surprise, LeVar Scott finished second this season in the ARCA standings and did a really strong job this year, though he did not end up picking up a victory. There were a couple races in 2024 where he definitely showed a lot of potential. He's likely going to be back with this program in 2025 in ARCA as they're expected to continue. Solid job for him. Continuing on with Connor Zilisch. No-brainer, in my opinion. Connor Zilisch probably should have won the ARCA East Championship, won more races than William Sawalich this year, got robbed of a championship thanks to a bunch of people at Bristol Wrecking like Amber Balkan and Logan Mizuraka, and then I think he should have won the Rookie of the Year, but it is what it is. At least he got the Rookie of the Year, but he should have probably won the ARCA Championship, in my opinion. And then finally looking at Eric Johnson Jr., he did a solid job this year in ARCA West. He never really was a major threat for the title by any stretch of imagination, but Eric Johnson did show potential with McAnally Hilgeman. I also think he'll be back with McAnally Hilgeman in 2025, though I have to say if Tyler Reif had been eligible for it, he probably should have won it because Tyler Reif is really good in my opinion, or even Landon Lewis, who I think has ran in both ARCA East and West this year. So, though, I think it's a very solid rookie class for 2024. Congratulations to all three individuals on winning the Rookie of the Year for ARCA in 2024. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Chris Wright. As it was announced on Wednesday morning that Chris Wright will join Our Motorsports full-time in 2025, driving a number 5 car, replacing Anthony Alfredo. Chris Wright is bringing a lot of sponsorship from F&B Corporation, who sponsored Chris Wright really since his truck days back in 2021 and 2022. Chris Wright, of course, this past season ran full-time for Venturini Motorsports and did have a couple chances and opportunities to win, but generally for the most part struggled in Venturini Motorsports equipment. I really question this move personally. I understand that you need funding and sponsorship, but you're going down a major downgrade from Anthony Alfredo to Chris Wright. Anthony Alfredo in 2024 finished 16th in the standings, had an outside chance and opportunity to make the playoffs this year, won the Dasher Cash at Dover, and was very fast at times and qualified really well. And Anthony Alfredo brought sponsorship and funding to the table. But you're bringing Chris Wright in, and I'll be real and honest, as much as I think some people probably like him, I've seen most people very much in disagreement with Chris Wright, and I completely agree with them. I don't think Chris Wright is deserving of a full-time ride in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. I don't think he's qualified for it personally. He has not done a good job in the lower series. He didn't win a race with Venturini this year, and he just never stepped up and performed at a very strong and good level. And I really think that he is going to struggle immensely in 2025. And I would not be shocked or surprised if you see him out of this ride by the end of the year or maybe the middle portion of the year, because I'm worried that Chris Wright is going to destroy a lot of equipment. I don't think he's that good. I think he's really struggled, and I don't think he is going to do a solid and good job with this program in 2025. I'd like to see him prove me wrong and do a really good job, but at the end of the day, I'm really not expecting much from him this upcoming season. I think he will struggle quite a bit, and I think there's some big struggles coming his way. I don't think it's going to be a strong, good year. I think he will finish most likely outside the top 25 in owners' points, especially with the Xfinity Series being extremely stacked for the 2025 season. I really hope he can prove me wrong, but at the end of the day, I'm not really expecting him to do much in 2025 with Our Motorsports this year. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Stewart-Haas Racing. Now, Deb Williams put out a tweet last night, basically for the evening close, showing that Stewart-Haas Racing has officially rebranded to Hos Factory Team. Remember, Stewart-Haas Racing is now officially closed. All the drivers have found rides for the 2025 season. They're rebranding to the Hos Factory Team for 2025. Cole Custer is going to drive the 41 car with Aaron Kramer, who's been an engineer with RFK Racing. He'll be the crew chief for Cole Custer in 2025, while their NASCAR Xfinity Series program will have Sheldon Creed in the 00 car, and Sam Mayer will drive the 41 car, though the crew chiefs had not been announced at this time, though we do think there's some potential candidates like Jonathan Toney who could be getting into the crew chiefing spot for one of these guys in 2025. I think the Hos Factory Team is going to have some really really big shoes to fill going into the 2025 season. For their Xfinity program, I do think they're going to be solid. I do think that the Hos Factory team will be championship contenders, and I would not be surprised or shocked if you see them at least go to victory lane. I really think that they have potential to get the Xfinity Series title done, but will they get it done? That is definitely a major question for them to answer. Hope they can prove me wrong and do great. I think Sam Mayer will win. I think Sheldon Creed has a good chance of winning a race. As for Cole Custer, I think Cole Custer is going to struggle a little bit in 2025. I think he's going to be better than he was in the Cup Series the first go around, but I do think he is going to also struggle a little bit in the 2025 campaign. I just don't see Cole Custer contending for wins outside of maybe super speedways, and he might get a couple occasional top 10s throughout the year, but realistically the goal should be top 30 in the points. There's a lot of really good competition going into the Cup Series next year, and I do think that it unfortunately is going to affect this program going into 2025. Again, I really hope they can prove me wrong and run strong in the 2025 campaign. But again, realistically, I'm not expecting them to set the world on fire. I think there's some big struggles coming away for the program. And I think at least on the Cup side, it's going to be a very difficult road to climb out of going into 2025. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Anthony Alfredo. Now, Anthony Alfredo, we already talked about the fact that Chris Wright will be joining our motorsports in 2025. This means that Anthony Alfredo, his future is currently uncertain at this particular moment in point, and it's unclear what Anthony Alfredo is going to be doing for 2025. Now, Anthony Alfredo does bring some sponsorship and funding to the table from Dude Wipes and a couple other companies, so definitely there are teams out there that could be looking at Anthony for 2025. I think Anthony does deserve to be racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series because while he did make some mistakes near the end of the year and cause that incident at the end of the year with a couple other drivers and got a $25,000 fine, got into Stephen Parsons at Alpha Prime Racing, I still do believe that he is deserving of a chance and opportunity to be in a very solid program. He's been good with underfunded teams. He was pretty solid with BJ McLeod Motorsports in 2023, and in 2024, I think he did a really solid job with our motorsports. Now, the big question is going to be, where's Anthony Alfredo going to end up in 2025? Realistically, I think you're going to see Anthony Alfredo probably with a team like Jordan Anderson Racing. There's been a lot of chatter that he is potentially a candidate for Jordan Anderson Racing for the 2025 season. If he ends up over at Jordan Anderson Racing for the 2025 season, I think that is a lot of remove for the organization. I think Parker Retzlaff and Anthony Alfredo are very similar on talent. They're both pretty talented race car drivers, and I think Anthony has shown potential, and I think that it may even be a little bit better equipment than our motorsports, at least going into next year. I know that Jordan Anderson Racing did have some issues in 2024, but I do think they'll be able to work that out, especially if Anthony gets a chance and opportunity to be with this program in the 2025 campaign. But like I said, I think it's very likely, and I think it's very realistically too at this point, that Anthony Alfredo will probably end up at a program like this for 2025. I think Anthony deserves to be in a good seat, and we'll see where he ends up going. But again, I do think it's very likely at this point he'll be in a pretty solid program, and I think there's a good chance it could be with a team like our motorsports going into the 2025 season. We'll see how he ends up going. But again, I think right now the front runner has to be Jordan Anderson Racing. There's other drivers who could end up in that program for the 2025 season. We'll see what happens in regards to that going into the near future. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Circuit of the Americas. As it was announced yesterday that Circuit Americas will officially be changing their layout for the 2025 year for the NASCAR Cup Series and the Xfinity Series. For the last 4 years, they have been using the full Formula One layout, which I believe is a 3.14 or 3.18 mile racetrack. But they are going to be changing the course for 2025, where they're going to be going to the stadium type of track. It will be going down from 3.14 miles down to 2.3 miles. They will not be going through the S's. They will not be going up to that bus stop up there, and they basically will not be going all the way down the long straightaway completely. They're going to be cutting it down to basically be a lot shorter, but the race will be extended a little bit more. With the long 3.14 mile track, it was, I believe, 68 or 69 laps. The track will now host 100 laps, so it's not been confirmed exactly how many laps they're going to run at Circuit of the Americas this upcoming season. For me, I think there's definitely some positives and negatives. On one hand, basically the negatives, we'll get to that first, is that you're going to lose a potential passing zone. Up there in turn number 7, there's a really good braking zone, and that's a really, really good passing zone, and we've seen some really good passes take place up at that track. Then again, if you're Kyle Busch or Alex Bowman, you've kind of gotten screwed over there in the Craftsman Truck Series, which led Zane Smith to win a couple years ago, so maybe you're more happy about going to that stadium section. They're getting rid of a pretty big braking zone. The other thing is that you're getting rid of that long straightaway. One of my favorite parts of Circuit Americas is a long straightaway that takes around 30 to 35 seconds or something like that to get down. You are going to be losing that straightaway. So I think those are some pretty big negatives. The positives is, one, the cautions are not going to take as long. One of my biggest gripes I've had with Circuit of the Americas, especially with NASCAR stage cautions they bring out, the cautions last forever at Circuit of the Americas. And maybe they could have just changed it to where they've gone through the stadium section during the cautions. But I think that if they're going to do this, I think this is the right call, especially for how long the cautions end up taking place. I think it's also going to be better for the fans going to the race as well, right? They're going to be able to be a little closer, and I think the fan experience will end up being a lot better. I'm not like the biggest fan of these changes overall, believe me, but at the same time, I think for the fan experience and for that sake, I think it is a decent decision, all things considered. Is it perfect? No, but when you have something rumored as big as this that is likely going to happen, and many people in the industry are starting to talk about it, it's kind of known it was likely going to happen at this point. For me, though, I think it is a solid change, all things considered. It's not perfect by any stretch of imagination. I would still love to see him do the full course for 2025. But at the end of the day, they've got to make the right changes. And I do think that this could be a solid change for them. And hopefully that can lead to some really good things going forward, especially another passing zone opportunity. And maybe some really good racing going forward, especially in turn number 1. I'm hoping the racing can just be as good as it's been in the past at this track. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Parker Retzlaff. Now, obviously, we know that Parker Retzlaff will not be returning to Jordan Anderson Racing in 2025. Likely, Anthony Alfredo will be his replacement in that 31 car for the 2025 season. But a big question a lot of people have had is, where is Parker Retzlaff going to go in 2025? Well, there are a couple of articles and reports that are starting to come out about potential replacement teams that Parker Retzlaff could end up going to in 2025. It was first reported by NASCAR Rumor Nostalgia that potentially Parker Retzlaff could get an upgrade for 2025 as he could be headed back down to the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series, but might be going to Spire Motorsports in 2025. This would be an upgrade over Jordan Anderson Racing. Yes, going down to another lower series instead of being Xfinity, going down to a lower series, honestly is something that some drivers really do not like to do. But I think if you're going to a team like Spire where you can show your potential and show you're a really, really good driver, I would definitely take a chance and for that opportunity. The other team, according to Daily Downforce, is Alpha Prime Racing. They have heard from a couple different sources that they have heard that potentially Parker Retzlaff could head over to Alpha Prime Racing in 2025. We already know that Brennan Poole will be back with this program for 2025, while Ryan Ellis will be going over to DGM Racing to drive the number 92 car in the 2025 season. This would not be a great team to go to. I think Alpha Prime would kind of be a little bit of a downgrade in my opinion, but Parker Retzlaff is someone who has taken cars that have been mid-pack and qualified very well and has had some really solid runs. So I think he could be almost on the same level as Brennan Poole over at Alpha Prime Racing. For me, though, if I had to choose between Spire Motorsports, where I could potentially have a chance to win races and get my name out there more, compared to Alpha Prime Racing, which is the mid to back of the pack team at times, I would take the team that I'm going to get the best chance and opportunity at, and I do think that a team like Spire is really the way to go. Now, I think it's going to be interesting because of the Chevy stuff. If he goes to Spire, I think that kind of takes away the rumor of why he lost his seat, though. From what Bob Pockers had said, he apparently had been talking to some other teams and organizations about making a change and making a move for 2025, which is why I think what happened to Jordan Anderson Racing truly ended up happening. I really hope Parker does find a ride, though, for 2025. I think he truly does deserve to be in the sport. He's a very talented driver. He's shown a lot of potential, and I really hope he gets a chance and opportunity to be in a good team. I think Spire will be a really good organization. I hope he truly ends up with a good, solid organization for 2025. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Richard Childress Racing. As it was announced on Wednesday late morning to early afternoon that Richard Childress Racing has announced some major competition changes for 2025. Keith Rodden, who's been part of Richard Childress Racing for the last couple of years, who worked with Austin Dillon for a couple of years or so, will be moving to VP of Competition starting in 2025. Randall Burnett will also continue working with Kyle Busch in 2025. This is a no-brainer in my opinion. Randall Burnett was not the problem over there at RCR, and Randall Burnett, I think, is a very, very solid crew chief. He's won Xfinity Series titles with Tyler Reddick, and I think that Randall and Kyle Busch working together has worked out in some ways, but I also think there's been some struggles for sure. The changes, though, that are coming for this program in 2025 is they're bringing some ex-Stewart-Haas racing employees over to the team for 2025. Johnny Klossenmeyer, who's been one of the technical directors for Vigo Performance at Stewart-Haas Racing, will move over to RCR as a technical director for RCR. Johnny Klossenmeyer was a decent crew chief in my opinion. He did work with Chase Briscoe and other drivers, I think like Tony Stewart or Kurt Busch at one point. He does have a couple wins as a crew chief, so I think he is a solid crew chief, but he's not the best crew chief out there. But I think going into the technical side of things where he worked as Vehicle Performance for SHR, that does concern me just a little bit, but I do think at the same time Johnny Klossenmeyer coming into the program brings some younger, fresh blood into the team. And finally, the big hiring. Richard Boswell is going to be moving into the crew chief for Austin Dillon in 2025. This is very, very interesting. Richard Boswell is one of the most underrated crew chiefs in the NASCAR Cup Series. He, of course, won the Daytona 500, not Daytona 500, the Southern 500 with Chase Briscoe earlier this year, the last win for Stewart-Haas Racing. And Richard Boswell also won a lot of races with Chase Briscoe in the NASCAR Xfinity Series and also worked with Riley Herbst and had some decent runs with him for the first couple of years. I think Richard Boswell could bring it out of Austin Dillon to where he could perform a lot better. Austin Dillon has struggled over the course of the last couple of years. Since 2023, it's been a little bit of a struggle. You go back prior to 2023, and he ran a lot better. But a lot of people are going to say, well, they're bringing people that aren't that great. Well, at least they are making changes right over at RCR. One of the things is that Richard Childress Racing had one of their statistically worst seasons they have had in a very, very, very long time. And I don't think it's a bad thing to make changes to your program to make your program a lot stronger and especially a lot better. And I think that them getting these two people in from SHR who work at SHR when they were actually really, really good, to me makes a lot of sense. I want to see Kyle Busch get back up to the front a lot more consistently. I think a lot of us want to see Austin Dillon potentially get better because we don't know how long Austin Dillon is going to be in the sport, right? But I want to see RCR be a better organization. We wanted them to kind of turn around like RFK Racing has over the course of the last couple of years. We want to see them kind of get back to where they were a few years ago in 2022 when Tyler Reddick was winning 3 races and Kyle Busch at the start of 2023 was scoring 3 victories. I think we all want to see RCR get a lot better because they haven't been a championship caliber team really since about 2014 and probably since Kevin Harvick was at the organization. So I think hiring some new people and some new blood and some new fresh faces into the program, I think only makes a lot of sense. And I think it is the right decision to go ahead and try to get your program back up and make it a lot better. I think this is a really good move for RCR in all honesty to hire some new people on the competition side. They have been saying that they were planning to hire a bunch of people. It's also been rumored that Greg Zipadelli might have gone over there for 2025, though nothing is officially confirmed at this point in regards to that. But as for RCR, I think they're making some solid changes, all things considered. I do like the moves that they're making as a whole. And to me, I do like that they're making some actual changes for 2025 to make things a lot better and make that program a lot stronger. We'll see if the changes in the fundamental things that they're doing over there at RCR can really help that program going into 2025. We'll see how things end up working for the program in 2025. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of 2 major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Zane Smith. Now, earlier today, it was reported by the NASCAR Rumor Nostalgia account that it still sounds like that Zane Smith will be headed over to Front Row Motorsports in 2025, most likely behind the wheel of the number 38 car. However, they have reported that instead of potentially being a full-time ride for Zane Smith in 2025, it does sound like there's potential possibility this might only be a part-time entry for Zane Smith in 2025. Now, look, we all know that Zane Smith, of course, will not be back with the Spire Motorsports family for the 2025 season, along with the Trackhouse Racing family as well. Shane Van Gisbergen is taking that third seat and will be teammates, of course, with Ross Chastain and Daniel Suarez in 2025. Because of this, and not getting 4 charters for the next year, this left Zane Smith out to the cold. There's obviously were rumors at the time about him maybe going to a team like McAnally Hogeman Racing for the 2025 season, though I didn't think that was going to be very likely, and there were rumors about him going to other programs, maybe in the Xfinity Series, like maybe Tricon in the Truck Series, well, perhaps for 2025. But Front Row Motorsports has been the favorite landing spot for Zane Smith in the third seat. Now, I still think it's very likely at this point that it will be a full-time entry for Front Row in 2025. I think Zane Smith brings a little bit of sponsorship with him, and Zane Smith going back over to Front Row makes a lot of sense. I know that Kevin Harvick had kind of suggested on his podcast that basically Ford was really, really upset and pissed off at Zane for leaving. Well, Ford needs to kind of tough it out and let them make that right move, because I think Zane Smith is absolutely a really good driver. It's no secret that at the beginning of this year, Zane Smith had a terrible start to 2024 and did not perform very, very good. But in the second half of the year after Sonoma, he had one of the best average finishes of the field, dropped from like a 30th place average finish down to like an 18th place average finish throughout the rest of the season, and got a couple top 5s at that near the end of the year. He has showed so much potential at the end of this year, which is why a team like Front Row Motorsports has been looking to pick him up for 2025. And we all kind of thought he would be going full-time with this program for next year. However, if this is true that it's going to be part-time, it also would not surprise me. Front Row Motorsports is one of the 2 organizations that is currently in a lawsuit with NASCAR. We're going to talk about that in the second video later today, or potentially third video later today. But I think that Zane Smith should be going full-time with this program, and Zane Smith deserves to be full-time in the NASCAR Cup Series. Zane Smith is a driver that, in my opinion, has a lot of potential to be really, really strong in the sport, and potential to lead this sport to a very prosperous future. He's got a good personality, has a really good social media brand especially, and I think that Zane Smith has shown so much potential in the NASCAR Cup Series this year. Again, could he go back down to the Truck Series too? That is certainly a possibility, and there are still some very solid truck rides out there. Front Row just wanted to put him up part-time this year in Cup, moving back full-time to the Truck Series to be teammates with Lane Briggs. I think that would be a very, very interesting move. As for Zane Smith, though, going to Front Row, I think it definitely makes a lot of sense in a way for him to be over there. He's worked with them in the past, right? I think Zane has done a very, very solid job as a whole, and I do believe that Zane Smith should be full-time in the sport in 2025. Again, I think it all will unfortunately, though, come down to what happens with the charter stuff in the charter agreement, and I'm very worried that the charter agreement is going to unfortunately affect this, because we know that NASCAR really at this point doesn't want to reach a settlement with the teams at this time. They're wanting to probably continue this lawsuit and continue talking about this going forward. So we're going to have to wait and see what happens. Now, Zane Smith does go full-time in 2025. I realistically do not see him competing for a championship this upcoming year. I don't think he even makes the playoffs this upcoming year, but I think Zane Smith will have an outside chance and opportunity at super speedways, and I think even on some of the shorter ovals especially, I think he'll be competitive, but I think he will be qualifying very, very well on super speedways. One thing that Front Row has done an exceptional job with, especially this year, is qualifying on the front row at super speedways. Michael McDowell in 2025 scored 6 victories, and he did it's not 6 victories, but 6 poles. And Michael McDowell won the most poles of 2024. Now, I don't think that's going to be the case for 2025, because Spire has kind of struggled on basically running super speedways and qualifying at those, but I do think that we're going to see Zane Smith show that potential this upcoming year. I think that he is a very, very talented race car driver, and I think he's earned the right and chance and opportunity to be full-time with this program in 2025. Again, though, I think a lot of it is unfortunately going to come down to what happens with the charter agreement and what happens to those charters for those teams that are involved with it for 2025. So we'll see what officially happens in regards to that coming up really, really soon. But I do think there's some major things to watch out for in regards to that, and we'll see if Zane Smith does officially truly end up over at Front Row. I think it's very likely still at this point, but we're going to have to wait and see what happens in regards to that going into 2025. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Chandler Smith. As Chandler Smith, they released a post and a video earlier today, basically thanking Joe Gibbs Racing for everything and thanking everybody as fans, the sponsors, the drivers, and everybody that I worked with for all the success we had in 2024. As a chapter closes, I'm ready for the next chapter for 2025, and I don't have anything currently signed for 2025 as I wait for the next chapter to come in. This officially confirms that Chandler Smith will not be returning to Joe Gibbs Racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2025, which has been rumored for the last couple of months. I've been hearing rumors about Chandler Smith potentially being out of Joe Gibbs Racing really since going all the way back to August or even July, when it became rumored that William Sawalich, Taylor Gray, and Brandon Jones were the most likely candidates to go full-time with Joe Gibbs Racing this upcoming season, which that got confirmed in the last couple of months. Chandler Smith had a very solid year in the NASCAR Xfinity Series with Joe Gibbs Racing, scored 2 wins this year, those coming at Richmond and Phoenix, and also was extremely consistent throughout the year. He had the second or third best average finish of drivers in 2024 and ran up front on a very, very consistent basis and was just out there performing at a very exceptional and a very, very strong rate throughout the 2024 season. Unfortunately, Chandler Smith did not make the championship four, despite the fact that if you go to the Winston Cup era points, he would have been the champion. Chandler Smith is a driver that has shown a lot of potential over the course of the last couple of years. Now, why is Chandler Smith, though, out of a ride at Joe Gibbs Racing for 2025? The answer is very simple. Chandler Smith has lost a lot of funding and sponsorship this year. A lot of money that he had for 2024 went into basically paying for his ride over at Joe Gibbs Racing. Remember, he had worked with Kaulig Racing, which at the time, there was a linear potential path to move back up to the NASCAR Cup Series, to go full-time in the Cup Series with a team like Kaulig Racing, but instead, he took the money route and went over to Joe Gibbs Racing because he had companies like, I think, Safety Culture or some of the other companies working with him that wanted to work with him for 2025, like QuickTie, and it sounds like a lot of that funding has kind of dried up. Now, where could Chandler Smith end up going in 2025? We'll get to that here in a minute, but I really hope Chandler Smith can find a ride at a really good organization. Chandler Smith is someone, in my opinion, that deserves to be full-time in the sport. Now, did he potentially burn a bridge with an organization like Kaulig Racing? Certainly. That is definitely a major, major possibility that he could have burnt that bridge over at Kaulig Racing. There's no denying that. But at the same token and same time, I look at his teammate, the people coming in over at Joe Gibbs Racing. And this is no disrespect to Joe Gibbs Racing's full-time lineup for next year, but they have the weakest lineup they've had in a very, very long time. They're going to have William Sawalich in the 18. Solid driver, in my opinion, but in the few races he ran in Xfinity, he kind of struggled a little bit. He did have some okay runs like at Homestead before he had the flat tire, but he never really set the world on fire. Then you have Taylor Gray, who has shown potential with Joe Gibbs Racing, just had some engine issues. And of course, Ty Gibbs will be owning the car that he's going to be running in. But I don't expect Taylor Gray to be a championship contender like Chandler Smith was. And then I look at Brandon Jones. This is no offense to Brandon Jones, and I do think Brandon Jones will do better going back over to Joe Gibbs Racing. But at the same token, same time, I'm really not expecting that next year for Brandon Jones. I just don't see Brandon Jones going in there and really performing at a very strong and really great level in 2025. I think he will have chances to win. Do I think he's going to make the playoffs? I don't know exactly. But that's one thing about Chandler Smith is, unlike a lot of these guys, I think Chandler Smith is someone that you probably can rely on to potentially make the playoffs in 2025. So I don't know why they're not picking him up. Again, a lot of it does come down to sponsorship and funding. And you're going to need a lot of sponsorship and funding if you're going to be competing in the sport going forward. Now, where could Chandler Smith head to in 2025? Well, there are some decent options out there for the 2025 season. There's been a rumor going around as of late that he could potentially be part-time with Rich Schultz Racing in the NASCAR Cup Series in 2025. They are likely bringing back the 33 car. It does sound like Austin Neal and Jesse Love are going to be two of the drivers behind the wheel of that C. And Will Brown, another supercar driver like Shane Van Gisbergen, is probably going to be making some select starts in that C. But it sounds like they're going to be running the 33 car a lot more in the 2025 season, and Chandler Smith's name has been linked as a potential candidate over there at RCR for 2025. I think that would be a very interesting move. Bring him out to a track like Richmond, which we know he's historically very, very good at Richmond. I could definitely see him being very strong if he ended up at a team like that for 2025. As for other teams out there, there is Jordan Anderson Racing, We are not expecting Jeb Burton to be back with the program in 2025, and while I do think it's a little bit of a downgrade, I certainly think that Jory Anderson Racing is a team that with the right people in the right places, I really think that if you put Chandler behind the wheel of this program full time, I really think he could be pretty solid and pretty successful. So I definitely could see him going over to a team like Jory Anderson Racing. There's also a lot of Truck Series teams out there that are options. Bill McAnally's team, the McAnally-Hilgeman Racing Group, we're going to talk about later this week. Basically, they're going to have the 19 truck no longer available, but there's a couple McAnally-Hilgeman Racing trucks that are available for 2025. There's also Nice Motorsports has got a truck available, and I even think Tricon Garage does have a truck available for 2025. So those certainly could be options and potential possibilities for the 2025 season for Chandler Smith. But I really hope that he gets a chance and opportunity to still be in the sport. I get he's had issues with teammates. I get he's had issues with a lot of people. But at the end of the day, I still think that he should be racing in the sport. He is too talented of a driver, especially with someone who is super, super young, only 22 years old, I believe. He should be racing full-time in the sport right now. He should kind of be like Eric Almirola, who should be full-time in Xfinity, though that's not happening, or Corey Heim should be in Cup, but that's obviously not happening either. But I really hope he gets a chance and opportunity to go to an organization for 2025. But I'm also not shocked or surprised to see that he is not coming back over to Joe Gibbs Racing in 2025. I really hope we can find the right funding and sponsorship for next year so he can compete. Let's hope someone can bring the funding and sponsorship ready for him so he can officially compete with an organization in 2025. I think most likely RCR part-time, even maybe full-time Xfinity could be an option, but we'll have to kind of wait and see what happens in regards to that for 2025. So, that is going to be today's NASCAR news and motorsports news episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. List description below that, and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. Where do you think Chandler Smith is going to end up in 2025? Let me know it in the comments below. And do you think Zane Smith will truly end up at front row? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. There will be another video dropping on the channel later today. We'll have a lot of the news that I did not cover in this video. We'll talk about the Row Motorsports and the 2311 Racing lawsuit along Bubba Wallace and Michael Jordan. We're also going to give an update on Riley Hurst. We'll talk about Daniel Hemrick. We'll talk about maybe Haley Dean, Connor Zillich, Kurt Busch, Carl Edwards, Kyle Busch, all those people, you name it, like Shane Van Gisbergen 2 and Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott, and Ross Chastain as well. We'll probably talk about it all this week. And then if there's any major news that breaks throughout the weekend, we'll have special breaking news videos on that, like Junior Motorsports as well, discussing it here live over the course of the next couple days. And I've got some very fun and special content dropping for you guys very, very soon. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.